Right, so now that we downloaded Qubes and verified its integrity, so we're sure that it did not get modified by anybody else since it was released by the Qubes developers, the next step is to flash Qubes to a USB stick so we can use that USB stick to install Qubes. Now, we're going to use a program called Etcher. This is the exact same program that we used to flash Tails to a USB stick. So, as we know, this program runs on Windows, Linux, and OS X. I have its download page in here. All you have to do is just go to it. It will automatically detect what operating system you have, click on download, and install it. You can also use this drop-down menu to download it for other operating systems if it did not detect your operating system properly. Now, I will not show you how to download and install it because I've already showed you how to do that previously. If you don't remember how to do that, please go back to the lecture where we flashed Tails to a USB. So, what I'm going to do right now, I'm just going to run Etcher and use it to flash Qubes to my USB stick. Now you'll notice using it is identical to the way that we used it with Tails, but I'm just going to do it again for the sake of completion. So first of all, you want to click on Select Image to select the image that you want to flash to a USB stick. So we're going to navigate to my downloads where I downloaded Qubes, and I'm going to select the Qubes ISO image that I downloaded in the previous lecture. We're going to click on Open, and that's it selected. The next thing is we need to select the drive that we want to flash this Qubes image to. Now, I haven't connected my USB stick yet, so I'm just going to connect it to my computer. And as you can see, it will automatically get detected by Etcher. If this wasn't the correct USB stick that you want to flash Qubes to, you can click on Change and select the USB device that you want. Keep in mind the USB stick that you're going to pick in here will be formatted. Everything stored on it will be deleted. So if you're sure this is the correct one, you can click on Flash to start the process. We're going to click on Yes to continue. And all we have to do right now is just wait for Etcher to flash the image that we selected, which is the Qubes image, to the USB stick that we selected. Okay, perfect. So now the process is complete. As you can see, the image was flashed successfully. So now the USB stick that we selected can be used to boot into the Qubes installer. So in the next lecture, I'll show you how to boot into that and how to use it to install Qubes as a main operating system, or use it to install Qubes on another USB stick so that we have a USB stick with a live Qubes installation that we can use to use Qubes on any supported computer regardless of what operating system it runs. Now that we flashed the Qubes image to a USB stick, we can connect this USB stick to a computer and install Qubes as a main operating system on that computer, or we can use another USB stick, flash Qubes to it, and then use Qubes as a live operating system using this second USB stick. So we'll be able to connect it to any computer we want, regardless of what operating system it runs, and then we'll be able to use Qubes. And when we're done, the computer that we used will be back to using its default operating system. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Qubes is a complex operating system. So unlike the Tails USB, which we connect to pretty much any computer and boot into Tails, in order to boot Qubes image, we have to modify the BIOS settings of the computer that we're going to use. Entering the BIOS settings varies depending on the computer that you have and depending on the motherboard. On the right here, I have a table of the most common computers, along with the buttons that you need to press in order to enter the BIOS settings. So as soon as you turn on the computer or restart it, you'll need to press the button relevant to your computer in here in order to enter the BIOS settings. Once you're there, you want to make sure you enable virtualization. In most cases, you'll also need to disable secure boot and set the boot to legacy. This is optional, but to my experience, I had to do that in a number of laptops. Then you can finally configure your boot order to boot from USB first, or you can just restart and enter the boot menu like I showed you before with Tails and choose to boot from USB. So let me show you how to do this on a real computer. Okay, so this is a Lenovo computer. Therefore, based on the table that I just showed you, I will need to press F2 as soon as I turn on this computer in order to enter into its BIOS settings. So first, I'm gonna hit the power button to turn it on, and as it's being turned on, I'm gonna keep pressing F2 to enter the settings. And perfect, as you can see, I am in the BIOS settings right now. Now keep in mind, depending on your computer, the settings might look different than what I have in here. The main thing that you want to keep in mind is to modify the 4 settings that I mentioned earlier: enable virtualization, disable secure boot, enable legacy mode, and set it to boot from USB first. Like I said, you might find these settings under different categories or under different windows, but just make sure you modify these settings. So as you can see, for me, the first window that I see is just an information window. It doesn't really allow me to modify anything. Now you can use the keyboard to navigate between these windows or these tabs. So I'm gonna press the right arrow to go to the configuration window. And in here, the only thing that I want to modify is Intel virtualization technology. So I'm gonna use the down arrow to navigate to that. And I'm gonna hit enter to change the setting, press down to set it to enabled, and hit enter again to select it. Now, if you're not sure about how to use this interface, because like I said, you might actually get a different interface, keep an eye on the instructions that you see at the bottom, as they tell you exactly how to navigate and modify the settings. Now, I'm done with the configuration window. I'm gonna press the right arrow again to go into the security tab. In here, again, we have another option that we want to change, which is secure boot. And like I said, this is optional, but in my experience, this can interfere with booting into Qubes and prevent you from installing Qubes. Therefore, I'm gonna scroll down to secure boot, again, hit enter to change the setting, change it to disabled, and hit enter again. We're done with this window. Now that these are 2 settings done, we have 2 to go. So we're going to press right to go to the boot window. And in here, as you can see, the first option is the boot mode. We want to change that from UFI to legacy. So again, I'm going to hit enter and select legacy. You might not get this, but as you can see now, I got an extra option here. The second one, the boot priority, it's set to UEFI first. Again, I'm going to hit enter and change that to legacy first. And finally, you don't even have to do this. I'm going to change the boot order so that it boots from USB first. You don't have to do this because you can exit this and just manually choose to boot from USB. I'm just going to do it here so that when I restart, I won't even have to enter the boot menu. So I'm just going to scroll down to the USB and I'll bring it all the way up. Again, I'm looking at the bottom of the BIOS screen to see how I can move items up and down. So based on that screen, it's telling me that I can use F5 and F6 to do so. Okay, now we're done with all the settings. So we enabled virtualization, we disabled secure boot, we disabled UEFI, and we set the boot to legacy, and we set it to boot from USB first. We're done with everything. We're going to go to the exit. So again, I'm going to press the right arrow again, and I'm going to select the first option, exit saving settings. It's going to ask me, do I really want to do this? I'm going to say yes. And before hitting enter, because once I hit enter, it's going to restart my computer, I'm going to connect the USB device that I flashed the Qubes ISO image to. I'm also going to connect a second USB device. This is the one that I showed you in green, and this is the one that I'm going to install Qubes to. So I'm not going to install it as a main operating system on this computer. I will install it just to this USB stick so that I can use the second USB stick to run Qubes on any computer that can support Qubes. So I'm going to use it as a live operating system, similar to the way that we were using Tails. And now that we are ready to restart, I'm going to hit enter to save the changes and restart the computer. Now, as you can see, it automatically booted using the USB stick into the Cubes image that we flashed to our USB stick. If this didn't work for you, if it didn't boot automatically into this, then enter your boot settings as the system is starting, similar to what we did with Tails, and force it to boot from the USB stick that we flashed Cubes to. So now we're ready to go ahead and install Cubes, and I'll show you how to do that in details in the next lecture. Okay, so now that we configured our BIOS properly to boot into the USB stick that has the Cubes image, as you can see, we managed to successfully boot into Cubes, and we have the installer right here. So as you can see, right now we have two options. We can select the first option to go ahead and install Cubes straight away, or we can go with the second option to test the hardware that we have first and then install Cubes if everything is fine. So I'm going to go with the second option. So I'm going to press the down arrow and hit enter to first test the hardware that I have, and if everything is fine, we will go ahead and install Cubes. Perfect, so we have the installer here, which means that we passed all the tests so far. Now the next steps are actually going to be pretty simple. First, it's asking us for the language. I'm going to keep it at English. You can change it to whatever language you want. So I'm just going to click on continue here on the bottom right. Next, we have a window that allows us to change a number of settings. You can change the keyboard, the time, the language. I'm actually going to keep everything the same. The only thing that I want to change is under the system category in there, which is the installation destination. This is the location where Cubes is going to be installed to, and this is the only difference that I've always been talking about between installing Cubes to as a main operating system or installing it on a USB stick. So we're going to click on this to change this setting. And this will show us a window that will list all the storage devices connected to this computer. So the first storage device that I have there on the left, you can see the size of it is 931 gigabytes. This is the built-in hard drive inside my computer. So if you want to install Tails on this hard drive as a main operating system on this computer, you'll need to select this hard drive. Alternatively, if you want to install Cubes on a USB stick and then use it as a live operating system, similar to what we were doing with Tails, so you'll be able to connect it to any computer that supports Cubes and use it on that computer, and then when you remove it, the computer will be back to using its default operating system. If you want to do this, then connect a second USB device to this computer. The minimum size of this USB device should be 32 gigabytes. As you can see, I have one connected to it and its size is actually 57 gigabytes, so it's over the minimum. So all I'm going to do right now is literally just click on the storage device that I want to install Cubes to, which is my USB device right here. As you can see, it's ticked right now, so it's telling me that this is where Cubes is going to be installed to. And again, keep in mind that when you select a device in here, everything stored on this storage device will be removed and Cubes will be installed there. So make sure you don't have anything important to you because it will be erased. So I'm going to click on done there on the top left. Now Cubes by default will encrypt the storage device that you pick. So right now it's asking me for a passphrase to use for this encryption. We'll be using this password to unlock the storage device that we picked in the future when we want to use Cubes. So I'm going to put my password in here and I'm going to click on Save Passphrase. Now in general, you should go back to the main menu at this stage. In my case, the USB device that I picked is not formatted properly. I intentionally did this just in case you face this issue. So if you're back at the main window, this is perfect. If you got the same warning that I have right here, then follow what I'm going to do in order to properly format this storage device and install Cubes on it. So we're going to click on Reclaim Space here at the bottom right. We're going to click on Delete All. And we're going to click on Reclaim Space. And that's it. We're back at the main window and we're good to go. So we're going to click on Begin Installation on the bottom right here. Now, like I said, this will take some time, so be patient with it. It will even take longer time if you're installing it to a USB stick like I'm doing right now. So I'm going to pause the video and we'll resume once the installation is finished. Okay, so now the installation is complete. We will need to create a user in order to boot into Qubes using the USB stick. So I'm going to click here on User Creation. I'm going to set a username and then I'm going to set a password. And I'm going to click on Done. And right now I'm going to click on Finish Configuration on the bottom right. Okay, now the configuration is complete. And as you can see here at the bottom right, I can click on Reboot to reboot the computer. And then if I keep the second USB stick connected to the computer, it will automatically boot into Qubes because I changed the boot order. Or if I disconnect all the USB sticks, it will boot into the default operating system that this computer runs on. So I'm going to click on Reboot. And as soon as the computer restarts, I will disconnect the first USB stick, this one. This is the one that I used to install the Qubes image, and I kept the second one, the bigger one, connected to the computer in order to boot into the Qubes operating system. And as you can see, it's automatically booting into Qubes. So it's very important to distinguish between the two USB sticks. We use one of them in order to install Qubes, either to the built-in hard drive as a main operating system or to another USB stick. And then if we installed it on another USB stick, the second one will be the one that we use when we want to boot into the actual operating system. Right now it's booting into the operating system. Be patient with it. And as it's booting, as you can see, it's asking me for the disk password. This is the encryption passphrase that we chose when we installed Qubes. So I'm going to enter it and hit enter and just wait for the operating system to start. Now we're going to click on Qubes OS to set some final options. I'm going to keep everything to the default settings. You might want to enable this option if you want to download updates over the Tor network. I'm going to keep it unchecked because that will slow it down. Downloading updates is usually not banned, so you can just keep this unchecked. So I'm just going to click on Done and wait for Qubes to configure the virtual machines needed to run the whole operating system. Okay, so the configuration is finally complete now. This did take some time again, and it actually seemed like it froze at some stage there. So you will get this during the installation process. If it seems like it's stuck at a certain point, as long as the mouse is moving, then don't turn off the computer. Just give it its time, be patient with it, and it should finish the installation. So now everything is done. I'm going to click on Finish Configuration here at the bottom right. And perfect. Now we have the normal login screen for Qubes. So now in the future, all you have to do is connect the second USB stick to the computer that you want to boot Qubes from. Boot from USB and you will get to this screen. You won't go through the configuration every time. So put the password that we set. Hit enter. And perfect, now we are inside the Qubes desktop. Now you can see this is very similar to a basic Linux interface. If you have some experience with that, you'll be able to easily navigate this. If you don't worry about it. We'll talk about it in details in future lectures. But right now we finished installing Qubes as a live operating system to a USB stick. Now to turn it off, we're going to go to the top right. Click on Shutdown and click on Shutdown again. Now just to show you, so if I disconnect my second USB stick, this one right there, this is the one that we installed Qubes to. So if I disconnect it and start my computer, you'll see that it's gonna boot into Windows, into the operating system that it used to run before by default. So this is the whole point of installing Qubes to a USB stick. We'll be able to connect it to any computer that can run Qubes, use Qubes on that computer, and when we're done, the computer will be back to its original state, and we'll be able to take this USB stick with us anywhere we want and use Qubes from it.